Welcome in, Hawks fans. Your boy Bryce is back at it again for another Believe in Hawks episode. We have a special guest returning to the show for the second time, Glen Willis of the 8-29 podcast. Definitely a great podcast. Go check that out. Glen, we have a lot to talk about today, but first I want to ask you, how are you today, sir?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I made it to the weekend. It's Monday holidays are nice, but you kind of pay for it the rest of the week. So long days, but here we are, and looking forward to a weekend. And we're supposed to get some decent weather here in the Seattle area. So yeah, good. Always fun to talk Hawks with you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, man. Definitely appreciate you coming on, man. Having some time in your schedule, man. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it. So we're going to start with the draft. That obviously, with it being the month of June, the draft is this month, so that will be again the first biggest topic in Hawks community circles. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. Obviously, them having the first pick have basically the pick of the litter of whoever they want. But the biggest two is Risacher and Sarr. Those have been the two guys that have been most connected to the team. People are trying to figure out best fit, best player to work with the construction of the team. Obviously, we don't know what they're going to do after that, but I just want to get your thoughts on that debate and just talk about both players.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing to think about, right? So I think in a vacuum, I think Sarr offers kind of the broadest appeal to. But when you look at the Hawks roster, as I talk to people about what the Hawks might do with this pick, the conversation seems to be, how do they really feel about Okongwu as their center of the future? And then we could have a philosophical discussion on how much should that matter when you're picking first, right? And there's so many different ways to think through kind of that scenario. So for me, if I'm making the pick, I think I lean Sarr just because he's such a unique player. The size he has, everybody wants to say he's not quite really center sized. And I think people, if you look around the league, you'd be surprised how few guys are really that much bigger than him that play at center position. I mean, teams are increasingly, especially because of the continued investment in 3-point shooting across the league, having a big man that can get out of the paint and kind of make an impact at the level of the screen on the perimeter. That's a super valuable thing to have. And Sarr, I mean, as much as I like Okongwu, Sarr, I think has a better tool set than even Okongwu to kind of function out there. The big question for him is, what do you think he's going to become offensively, right? So you can kind of look at examples around the league of teams that have kind of invested in a power forward and center combo where there's not enough offense at that position. I think about the Cleveland Cavaliers kind of being one of those teams that just can't get over the hump because at times really all the workload falls to the guards and they're not getting any help at that position. Do the Hawks think they can develop Sarr as a shooter? Do they think they can develop Sarr as a guy who can function very well in the short roll? He shows flashes of both. He shows, a promising kind of raw skill set in both of those areas. But for me, the Hawks really need to move the needle defensively. And, another question is, do they feel like they can move Clint, off the roster? Because you presumably would need to do that, or Okongwu, unless you can get like a really, really good wing for Okongwu, something like that. And so for me, it's like I lean Sarr, but it's interesting. I've been getting hit with requests to kind of pick for the Hawks in these different mock drafts, and I did one yesterday where I picked Risacher because, and in that exercise, I was trying to think, what would I pick, or what do I think they're going to do? And Bryce, if you look at last season, their performance at the combo forward spot, like what with the time that Hunter missed, Bay went down, time that they just had nothing behind those three guys. And when it comes to Hunter and Bay, I mean, there's a lot I appreciate about Bay's game. A lot of it's just he plays hard. He's a dominant offensive rebounder when he's at small forward position. But they really just don't have a ton of reliable size to play defensively at that spot. And so when you look at kind of where they need to add to this roster, it's at the wing, and Risacher, I think, projects to be an impact defender. I have no idea if he'll become like, top 20 defender in the league. It's always hard to know with young guys if that's the case. But the shooting is there. His ability to kind of play on the catch is there. I know people are concerned about his passing. They did generate a ton of assists at different levels. And so for me, I feel like it's a coin toss. Like if I had to guess like what the Hawks are going to do, it's a coin toss. And if we're calling it kind of a 50-50 call right now, I think how they feel about a Kongwu is really going to be the thing that kind of drives them in one direction or the other. But they, I mean, they're playing Garrison Matthews at small forward last year. That's just not going to get it done. They're playing Wes Matthews at power forward last year. That's not going to get it done. So they definitely need more size at the forward spots, and Risacher offers a lot of that. So I think it's a tough call, and thankfully they have some more time to kind of work through that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that I think, especially with this draft, a lot of people say there isn't a clear number one, and I think that may have created some frustration too, because it's like, oh, there isn't that clear pick. It is not easy. It's like they actually have to sit there. Brass has to sit there and evaluate their options and scout guys and make sure, are we sure this is the guy that's going to fit best with our collective group and what we want to continue to build moving forward. So I think that is obviously a discussion that has to be had. I know Sarr is known for, people think he can maybe be impactful defensively early on, and then we'll see where the offense goes. That's why also a lot of people feel like if they draft him, Trey should stay because he can help with that offense. But I've made a theory with Sarr that he's obviously, most bigs at his age are like, they're super tall, but like they're very they're kind of slim. I don't think he's Chet Holmgren slim coming out, but like he's a slimmer guy still, and that's just because you're tall. So I want to ask you about this. I said that there could be a chance because of that, like any guy, like Muhammad Gueye was doing last year. He has to still develop his body a little bit, and obviously, if he's the first pick, you're going to expect him to play, right? Do you think the Hawks would consider putting him on? I don't want to say like a very low minutes restriction, but like some type of minutes restriction, just so it's like, listen, 82 games, you're going against guys bigger than you. We don't want you to get hurt. Like kind of like even what they did with Victor with the Spurs last year. They kind of were on the 20-minute restriction just to keep him healthy. Do you think that's possible drafting a guy like Sarr? Do you think they just let him go and we'll just see what happens?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, and sort of the physical development side is not my expertise. But I would say when you look at him, he looks like a guy that his body is going to be able to handle getting stronger, getting a little bigger, right? He has a decent sized frame. He's not a thin guy. He's just kind of wiry, maybe is the right kind of word there. But I think he's going to get stronger. I would expect him to get stronger. But it's funny because I went back and looked at kind of what Bam Adebayo did his first couple seasons, and he didn't play a ton. But I mean, Bam was the middle of the first round pick, so sort of expectations weren't the same for him as it will be for anyone who's picked first overall. But for me, I think there is a significant learning curve for him coming to the NBA. It's nice that he played at some fairly high levels at a young age, kind of coming up. But the NBA is just a different kind of set of defensive systems and things like that. So for me, I mean, I've said before, like, I don't think he starts at all his rookie season, no matter where unless he just goes to an absolutely terrible team. So say that the Hawks took Risacher and he went to the Wizards or whatever, but I think that's totally fine. If he plays off the bench and averages like 18 minutes a game or whatever, I think that's totally fine for his rookie season. I think easily the most important part of a rookie season for him is development, right? And that has to be there. The other thing that I think a lot of us, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit, so I won't leap forward too much. But a lot of it is, Trey, in the last couple months, for the first time, has started to talk openly about, hey, if this isn't going to happen here in Atlanta, I'm open to a change of scenery. I'm paraphrasing there. I don't want to put words in his mouth. But you wonder if the Hawks are thinking we need someone who can contribute more this year than maybe we would expect Sarr to contribute this year. And that makes you, I mean, Klingon is kind of NBA ready. I don't view him as a guy who's worth a first overall pick personally. But he has a more NBA ready game right now. He has a pretty advanced, screen game and defensively and things like that. But I think he's kind of a limiting player, not the kind that you normally would think of first overall. But you wonder if the Hawks are trying to prioritize someone they feel like they can, even like, let's say they went Risacher, and he played a lot, say the second half of the season. They use the first half of the season to kind of get him ready to play. What are they prioritizing? It's hard to know kind of what that is. I would always want someone to go big picture with a first overall pick and think, what's going to serve us well not just this year, but the next 8 years and beyond that, And for me, that leads me to Sarr. The other aspect for me that makes me feel like they could be successful with Sarr is, you know, Hawks fans have been vocal about this, but until this past season, they really weren't accomplishing much developmentally at College Park. They were kind of just filling that roster with a group of kind of quasi, veterans who are kind of on the fringe of the league. You get 26, 27-year-old guy. This last year, they got a lot done. Ryan Schmidt did a bang-up job down there. My co-host over 18-29, Kevin Chenard, covered a lot, provided a lot of coverage. I mean, Kobe accomplished a lot. Gueye didn't, you wish Gueye could have played more, but even he showed some development there. And when Lundy played for the Hawks, he looked like a guy who was learning and kind of growing there. And so for me, if they can kind of maintain that developmental ecosystem they had there, I think Sarr plays a lot at College Park when the G League season starts, and even if that's just like a month or whatever that is. But I feel like they have a better development infrastructure for a guy like Sarr, who I still view as a little bit of a project. That's mostly offensively. I think you really have to ask yourself, what do we think the most likely outcome is for him offensively? That's a massive factor. But I mean, if you go look at Bam's path in his third season, that was the season he played, I think, 58% of his minutes power forward, played a ton of time with Kelly Olynyk on the floor. I recall Kelly Olynyk kind of talking him through assignments and decisions and reads and things like that on the floor. And this makes you wonder, I mean, I have a hard time seeing Sarr getting a lot of playing time at power forward with Jalen on the roster. I don't view Jalen as a guy who should play much at the three. He's too unique for a guy you have in the power forward position. But going back to your questions, like, can Sarr bang, with the big centers in the league? And he, a Valanciunas and Embiid and, kind of on and on and on. You imagine him against the Pelicans, who were the Hawks throwing at Zion Williamson, kind of in that setting. So the question's perfect, really, around what can your expectations be for him his rookie season. And for me, if they take him, I think they should take a big picture view. I think they should ease him in and be patient. The question is, does the organization feel like they're setting themselves up to satisfy what Trey is looking for right now, if that's the approach they take? And that's a tough one.
Yeah, and I mean, if Sarr did go to the G League, I'm sure me and you have to prepare for what Hawks social might say, and they'll be like, "What are we doing?" And things of that nature. But it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of different options. I think it just depends. Like I said, it's the year what we have in the draft. They really were big on development when they hired Quinn. They said that was big for them, especially, like what Nate said multiple times. He was like, we're not. So I think that's why they take this approach. But like you said, now they also have that pressure of, okay, we also got to satisfy what Trey wants and, make sure he's good to go. Because, I think in a few years, you'll have to make a contract decision. And obviously, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where it's like, crap, we have to trade him or he asks out. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage that and how they manage Sarr and what the expectations are and et cetera and all of that. So transitioning from one developing big to another, actually, I want to ask you about Muhammad Gueye. I think a lot of people are excited for him, but at the same time, I guess there isn't a clear vision of, okay, does he break into the rotation next year? I mean, he missed a lot of his rookie year with an injury. So, like, do they still want him to go through G League a little bit more and develop? I just want to get your overall thoughts on him because I think a lot of people just see his potential. And I've said that I think out of everybody in this draft, he has the highest ceiling. It's just he just doesn't play basketball. He hasn't played basketball a lot in his life, and so he's learning the game still while also developing. And he's almost is like a 7-footer, so he would add height to the team if he was in the rotation. And we saw some flash, especially in the Indiana game at the end of last year. So what are your overall thoughts on the Gueye's prospect? And does that potentially affect a Sarr pairing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gueye is a factor, right? And I think if the ideal path kind of presents itself next year, I think he plays, I don't know, 800 minutes or more, next year, maybe more. I remember being at Summer League last year, just talking to people kind of around the team, and some people in around the organization would tell you that they felt like they got a a first round pick in the second round, and in some cases a kind of a mid first round pick. I mean, his ability to kind of move with the amount of length he has is unique. It's sort of you think about, it's like a 95th or more, or more percentile around just that combination, and that is so unique. And when you think about the way the Hawks need to develop defensively, they continue to build around Trey, is they got to have guys, behind the play that can just cover space. And I mean, and I can't think of a guy who has a more kind of natural skill set to just, I mean, he closes ground. Like it's unreal how quick he closes ground, and he's more experienced. But for me, it's, not to bring too many other variables into this, but is Bay coming back? I mean, if he does come back, he probably doesn't play until, I don't know, February, or whatever that is. So there's space there. But I think Gueye is very much in their plan for this next season. It is unfortunate he didn't get to play more last season, like you mentioned, because that development was there. And I think he's the guy who's going to play mostly at power forward. But when they were basically down all their centers for a game or two, he spent a good bit of time at center. And I think having him be able to kind of play as the term is small ball 5, in that sense. But even just watching him set how fast he is from the point of the screen to the front of the rim, when he's slipping or when he's rolling. I mean, that it's so hard for these defenses to kind of cover that kind of speed, from the point of the screen to the rim. And so there's just like a number of different qualities he has. He's way better screener than Sarr is right now, right? I mean, I remember watching him his first game in summer league last year, and a team not wanting to switch, say, a big on Kobe, and Gueye would like walk right into that screen and absolutely force a switch and carry his guy immediately down to the bottom of the floor. And so I was surprised at how advanced some areas of his game were when I watched him do that. But I think Gueye is a huge part of their rotation going forward. Like, is that from game one this next season? Hard to know because of the time this last year and the developmental gap that may be there for him. But for me, I don't think he should be a reason they don't pick Sarr. I think Sarr is going to predominantly play at the 5 in his career. I think Gueye's going to predominantly play at the 4. But if you kind of look at, situationally, you got, if you carry Okongwu and Sarr at center, Jalen and Gueye at 4, if those guys are healthy, you cover all those are guys that can cover space on defense and weak side rim help, all that sort of stuff. The rebounding, I posted some numbers in a tweet a couple days ago around what Okongwu plus whatever other player on the floor, like Okongwu and Hunter didn't rebound the ball at all on defense, basically. But with Jalen, numbers were good, right? With Okongwu and Clint, like the dominant, as you would expect, the defensive rebounding was exceptional. And part of what you wonder is if it's Okongwu plus Gueye, it's like, can they rebound? And that's a tough thing. I like the idea of bringing Bruno back as a third big, because he's not the biggest guy, but he loves to play physically, and he will go out and really just kind of take on that aspect. And so if there are some games where, say, you're playing Philly or you're playing someone who's playing a bigger, kind of center, maybe that's a game Sarr doesn't play as much or doesn't play at all in the first half of the season, and you use a guy like Bruno to go out and take those minutes. So, I think if they do draft Sarr and they carry Okongwu, Sarr, and Bruno at center, and then they carry Jalen and Gueye at power forward, you wonder, who else they might have at that position at power forward. But maybe that doesn't get Trey super excited about where they're starting the season, because I think he probably wants some more veteran, kind of presence on the roster at some of those spots, especially a combo forward position. But to me, that's a fun group of players to kind of think about building for in the 2 to 3 year window. Is it going to give them the results they want right away next year? Probably not. But it's, that's where you got to trade off. Are we going big picture here, or are we trying to set ourselves up to be a really, really good team next year? And it's interesting because the East, I still think the East is kind of wide open. Philly has a ton of cap space. I don't know what they're going to do. Milwaukee, the Dame and Giannis thing didn't quite work out. They're both getting older. They both missed a bunch of time with injuries. Miami's at a crossroads. So behind Boston, it's kind of wide open. So if the Hawks can kind of nail their roster construction and kind of play both sides of it, get some veteran rotation players right now and get some young guys to build for that 2 or 3. If they can kind of nail that, there's an opportunity to potentially kind of move up, pretty quickly. So for me, like I said, it's Sarr, but at the same time, like Risacher fills a gap, like probably their biggest gap they have on the roster right now, which is size at the combo forward spot.
Yeah, and I think too, when you think about Gueye, I think the thing is that, like you said, it's an exciting group. There is a lot of potential with that group. And like I said, now you go from being a small team to a big team. I think, you're adding Gueye, you're adding Sarr, and it's okay because Kongu, I've always said, is a really versatile defender at his size. He can switch, he can do different things. And that's something I also think they've missed, is having guys who can defend multiple positions instead of just one. Before they were kind of a one position team, and then you only had Hunter who could guard other positions, but you really didn't want him guarding guards realistically. And I feel like when Jalen was inserted into the lineup, that helped him a little bit, because Jalen can kind of, even though he has some work to do there still, they can kind of switch off in certain positions. And so I think, like you said, the trade thing will be interesting what he thinks about that. But at the same time, there's definitely a lot of potential with Trey as the point guard with that group. So I think that may be something the Hawks can sell him on for excitement moving forward. And speaking of Trey, too, I wanted to get your thoughts on the backcourt, because obviously that's been the big topic of discussion as well. What are they going to do? Obviously, when they traded for DeJounte, the focus was really offensively. People forget that was about, after what happened in the Miami series. Oh, we need somebody else who can, take over a game if they're going to lock in on Trey. And I feel like DeJounte has accomplished what he was set to do offensively. He's given them 20. He's hit game winners. He's had big games. We saw what he did when he was the guy for a month. But the biggest thing they overlooked was defensively, it doesn't seem to be working out. And that's made their point of attack one of the worst in the league. So I just want to get your thoughts on just your assessment of the backcourt, and just, what do you think they do there? What should they do there just to help? Because I've also made the argument, if you don't get rid of one of them, I don't see Kobe making the rotation, because it seems like Quinn's going to stick to the 3-guard system because DeJounte is a default backup point.
He has to play. Kobe has to play. He shows too much, especially like say defensively. He still has some growth to do. Around guys that are going to be physical with him, a little bit like some of the other Hawks guys. Not the biggest guy, but I said a couple times on Twitter last year, I think Kobe has a chance to be a defensive culture setter. For them, he's so invested on the end, plays so hard. His habits are good. His principles are great. All that sort of stuff. How do they create that path for him to play? Can you play 4 guards? Like, if you have Trey and DJ on the roster and Bogey, it's almost impossible to carve out real consistent minutes for a guy like that. And and so for me, you kind of look at, well, if you trade DeJounte, what is the market for him? Like, for me, I don't think it's like completely like offensively, I don't think it's like completely dead if you keep both of those guys, but it's not quite what you want, in terms of letting both guys lean into their strengths. It's almost impossible to let both guys really lean into what they do best when you're playing them together. Because you stagger as much as possible. And, for me, I feel like the Trey injury, as much as you don't wish that on anyone, was a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because DeJounte got to play point guard for the last few months, and he played great. He played awesome offensively, kind of the last couple months. And so for me, I feel like DeJounte's contract is a pretty good value contract, and there's enough teams in the league we saw in the playoffs, like teams that just didn't have enough creation. Minnesota was right there. I don't know that DeJounte's the best fit for them with what they do defensively, but you kind of look around the league and you think, if they decide, like, appreciate DeJounte. DeJounte's a really good player in my view, right? Defensively, he can't play the 2 and the 3. He's just not what you need there. And so I have to think DeJounte also would rather be in a situation where he's playing point guard full time, and kind of doing what he can do. And so I try to be careful, because I don't have any sort of dissatisfaction with DeJounte. I feel like DeJounte did a lot of what Quinn asked him to do: take more threes, more catch and shoot, be faster with his decisions on the catch, and that's not DeJounte's kind of natural style. DeJounte's natural style is to kind of pound the rock a little bit, read the defense, he's a little bit more deliberate, but he really leaned into play faster, play faster, play faster. And so I think he deserves a ton of credit for kind of responding to the things that Quinn was asking him to do. But if you kind of look at the situation, on one hand, the Hawks could say, he's a really affordable guy for what you get, from DeJounte. On the other hand, how do you create space for Kobe to play? we've seen like the whole time Bogey's been in Atlanta, he's been part of their statistically their best lineup. So that his ability to shoot the ball is massively valuable to them. And so I think if you can find a trade that makes sense for you for DeJounte, and again, I'm not saying this because I think DeJounte played poorly or I don't like him at all. I have a lot of respect for how hard he played this past year, especially when he got a chance to kind of go to the point guard position. But to me, I think just on paper, right? We have no idea what the conversations are behind the scenes, and Quinn might say, "No, I can make this work if I have the right defenders at 3, 4, 5." Yeah, I can make this work. But if we look at just like the statistical kind of results last year of that pairing, not good, and probably need to go in a different direction as long as they can find something that isn't too much like a net loss and a trade. They can get something back that helps them in a different place in the rotation. I'm not sitting here saying like, hey, he's got to go. Like a lot of Hawks fans on Twitter, like, got to get rid of him or whatever. And then the small percentage is like, got to get rid of the trade or whatever. But for me, I just think I'd love to see DeJounte in a place where he's playing point guard full time. I think he enjoys and would find that more rewarding and be an opportunity that allows him to feature more of his strengths than what he's doing here. I think he deserves a lot of credit for trying to fit in around Trey, which is hard for a guy who is really a point guard.
Yeah, and I like I said, I mean, DeJounte was an all-star when he was a point guard at San Antonio. I mean, I think we've heard things that he may have not, even though he excelled and he had career highs this year, that he wasn't still particularly the happiest with his role. We don't know what that's like, 100% outside of the league thing, but I think it's something that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. I mean, he hasn't came out and said he wants out. So, even though people speculate, but I think it'll be interesting to see how that relationship and that pairing goes and what Quinn in the front office believes they need to do. Because Landry did say, he was like, well, we need another all-star. So does that mean they're maybe trying to add to what they have? Or is that maybe getting another guy and try to hope you can acquire an all-star from a DeJounte Murray trade? So I think that would be an interesting question for them moving forward. But, when you talk about also the combo position, I know DeAndre Hunter obviously gets, a lot of heat, for what's happened. I mean, it's weird because it feels like he's coming off his best year, realistically, especially statistically, because he had a career high in points and 3-point shooting. Like, I think he's been working with Korver on that in his and it showed. He kind of became a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter for them this year, which I think helped the offense with spacing. Because I think years previously he was more main on of a mid-range guy. But at the same time, last thing we remember seeing of him was the Chicago game. And those are the games that make people say, yeah, we got to get rid of him. He's just not it. But I feel like it all depends on roles. Depends on what your role is. I think Hunter, when he's the fourth guy and he's like just able to kind of just flow within the team, I think he's fine. And that's why I said that I think Jalen Johnson was big for him, because now he's not that third. It'll be Jalen if DeJounte and Trey stay, and that helps his game. But at the same time, people may look at the contract and just say that's too much. We're paying him for, what he's giving us or health. So just give me your thoughts on Hunter and maybe potentially his future with the team. Obviously, he's been available, but, at the same time, wings are very valuable. And you don't just, especially when you have a lot of depth at a position. So just want to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I thought DeAndre was another guy who kind of, as the season went along, kind of leaned into the things that Quinn was asking him to do: play faster, play on the catch, those things. And again, for him, that's not the most natural thing. He wants to take his time, and a little bit like what DeJounte does. But so it's one of those things. I think you can say, I feel like you go on social media and it's like you either have to be all in for DeAndre Hunter or you have to, hate everything about it. It's like there's no middle ground. The reality for me is I think he made progress offensively this past year. I thought he was a better decision maker. I thought he played a little faster. I thought he was a little bit more aggressive as a shooter in a constructive way. I think that's all good. On the defensive end of the court, he's an awesome team defender. He's an awesome help defender. He has a lot of size to use kind of in those roles. I don't think he's, like you kind of touched on it in your questions, I don't think he's a guy you want defending point guards all the time. A guy who doesn't have a ton of burst and athleticism, like Shea doesn't kill you with his first step. Luka obviously doesn't, those guys, he's probably, a decent option to kind of spend, half the game, kind of defending those guys or what have you. But it's interesting because he's so much better now as a team and help defender than he is in any other defensive role. But the Hawks have literally nothing, no one else, unless Kobe plays a ton next year. Like, who is going to defend the ball? If it's not him. That's a massive issue from a roster construction perspective. So for me, it's, I feel like if they need to trade him, they could trade him because it's just guys like that are valued across the league. But the reality is that he still has offensive limitations that are probably always going to be there, right? His ball handling got a little cleaner this last year, like 10% maybe. But you get him in tight space where there's a help defender kind of digging on him, or like it kind of all comes apart when that second defender is impacting him as a ball handler still at this point. Can he get past that? I think we have to say at this point of his career, if he hasn't kind of shown a ton of progress there, you have to expect that this is kind of what he's going to be as a ball handler, maybe increment some marginal, progress or whatever. But there are times when, as a defender, or sorry, as an offensive player with the ball, once especially smart defenses take his space away with a help defender like that, because he does become easy to turn over, and things like that. The other part is I thought he did a better job at times working to the rim and not getting to that 12-foot, step back or whatever that is. And he shot more free throws this year. And so that was another area where he kind of leaned in, but I still think he has some limitations that you have to factor into what's going on with him and how much you can kind of rely on that. The other part is, I don't know if other people saw this, but when Trey was out and he was playing heavy minutes with DeJounte, he seemed really happy. He seemed very energized. And then when Trey came back, and I'm not trying to start, so I have no idea what the relationship is, but I just feel like for whatever reason, DeAndre feels like when DeJounte's running, the offense, that just seems to feel a little better to DeAndre. And so for me, another part of it is they trade DeJounte. What can they kind of do to kind of get Hunter feeling like he could be successful and contributing offensively? It's not just Hunter. Every player in the league that's not a star feels like their role should be bigger offensively. I mean, they all think that, and Hunter probably thinks that as well. And there are times when, he'll go out and put up 30 and just, hit 7 threes and just, but it does kind of come and go with him. And like I said, when you think about trying to build a team that can go deep in the playoffs, that's the setting where smart defensive teams are just going to crowd him, throw an extra help defender at him, dig on him harder even than most other situations. And that's where the handle really starts to become kind of revealed to be not really what you would want it to be at this point in time. So some limitations, and we can appreciate the growth and the progress and development and him responding to what Quinn has asked him to do, while also still recognizing that he has limitations that are probably always going to be a part of this offensive game.
Yeah, I mean, for Hunter too, I think it's important, that if you do move him, you find someone who fits what you want to do, what Quinn wants to do, the system, things of that nature. Obviously, he knows about spacing. He wants spacing a lot. Obviously, versatility, I think, is very big because it's more of the modern NBA model. And, having that positionless basketball, as people say, and just the ability to shoot is the main things that he would like in his system, with quick decisions as well. And I think, like you said, Hunter improved in some of those areas. It's just at the same time, he hasn't gotten to this point where it's like, oh, you have to keep him. But again, if you do trade him, what do you get for him? What does that look like? I mean, obviously with him and Clint Capella too, who also people say he's on the trade market. And, I've made the statement that I think, a team like Oklahoma City could use Clint. And I feel like they're at a point where if you want some first round picks, they have picks to give. They have a surplus. They're not like, oh, we need to keep these. They're like, oh yeah, we'll take 2. We'll take him. So that may be something the Hawks could look into. But my last question for you, Sarr, is just about Quinn in the front office and everything. From everything that you've heard, everything that we've seen, do you think we have more of a direction, an idea of what they want this team to look like, what they want this team to be long term? I think we have the draft class kind of seeing the type of prototypes those players were, potentially what they could do in this draft, and then what they do in free agency later on. But do you think it's more of a clear thing, maybe, that you've seen, like, okay, I think this is what they eventually want this team to be, and this is what they think can give them the most success moving forward?
Yeah, I think the vision is clear. I think the question all of us have, because of how the last whatever number of seasons have gone, is ownership going to support spending more money? Like this past year, they had like about, I don't know, $9 million before they would hit the tax. They didn't use that space to add someone that could have been an upgrade at some spot. And so will they use all of their resources to kind of build the roster forward? I mean, basically the comments from Trey make you feel like you've got to use all of your resources to kind of build that. It's interesting because the Herder trade, they kind of got nothing for it. Like, I mean, that pick may convey next year. We'll see how the Kings do. The JC trade, they moved him basically for nothing, and they missed JC's defense a ton this year. I agree they had to clear room for Jalen to play. I totally agree with that. But you still like to have got something a little bit more than kind of what they got back from Utah there. And it's interesting because when you think about Hunter, one of the impacts there is how do they feel about Veet? I mean, Veet was really good the last 2 months, and I mean, there's a legitimate thought process around, is Hunter going to be blocking Veet? In the way that JC was kind of blocking Jalen, kind of being able to ramp up the full amount of minutes that he needs to kind of develop his game. It's hard to know, but I mean, if you look at what Quinn wants offensively, he talks about 0.5, make a decision on the catch in half a second and go, right, shoot, pass, attack the paint, whatever it is. I mean, Veet did that perfectly, and he was surprisingly good depending on ball, which the Hawks just don't have enough of. And so a lot of it is, do they see Veet as a rotation piece, next year? I know Hawks fans are excited about what they saw from him, and I think a lot of Hawks fans will say he's a better basketball player than DeAndre Hunter. I'm not ready to say that yet, but I think he's a better fit for what Quinn wants to do on both ends of the court, right? In some ways, right? In that sense. And so for me, if you look at the Kobe pick, I mean, Quinn's fingerprints are all over that, right? Quinn wants a guard who can play both spots, defend the way he does. To me, if you kind of read between the lines in the reporting when Quinn was hired, you'll see some evidence that Quinn got some assurances that he has a significant voice in roster decisions. And, one thing I point to last year in terms of, the real question is, does Quinn really have the amount of voice he wants to have to kind of help shape the roster? And last year, down the stretch, AJ was back when he finally came back. And a lot of organizations, with AJ being a guy who was picked in the smack in the middle of the first round, would have put pressure on their coach to play him. And Quinn played Veet instead, the whole rest of the way. And so that, to me, that demonstrates that Quinn's making the decision on who plays. The front office is not steering him or pressuring him to kind of do something to make that draft pick look better by playing AJ. And so I think what's different now I understand Hawks fans saying, man, getting Hunter in that draft, how much they gave it, that was drafting Hunter at 4 in that draft class was fine. The amount it cost him to get that pick was, I thought, terrible. They gave up a ton to go get that pick, right? So I think the Hawks fans understandably look at the last 3 or 4 years, or wherever you want to draw the line, and think to themselves, why should I trust this ownership group? Why should I trust this front office? The thing that's changed is Quinn. And I'll say, since the trade deadline of 23, I think they've done a good job. I thought that Bay trade was good. I think getting Garrison Matthews and Bruno Fernando for basically nothing was great. I feel like those guys helped them, to the level that you would expect kind of in that deal. I think the Kobe draft pick was great. I think the Muhammad Gueye draft pick, trading up to go get Muhammad Gueye, I think that was great. I think they tried to chase trades last season to improve the roster and rebalance the roster, but didn't pressure themselves to take a bad trade and thought, no, we're going to wait until there's a better, kind of market for us to operate in. When they tried to go to Dallas wanted them, I think reports suggest Dallas wanted them to take the Hardaway contract if they were going to, move Clint to Dallas. And I think the Hawks didn't want that contract. Nobody else around the league did either. They tried to chase Siakam, and Siakam's reps basically said he's not signing an extension with you. So why, the Hawks said to themselves, why should we, make a significant kind of trade here? Let's assume a Congo would have to be in that deal. Why would you do that, right? And so I honestly think they've navigated transactions really, really well. Now I know Hawks fans tell me on Twitter all the time they didn't improve the roster last year. If only bad moves, if only moves that took you backwards were available last year, standing pat was absolutely the right thing. And they are functioning, maybe for the first time in a long time, big picture, right? They went from Lloyd Pierce to Nate. after they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, they basically got rid of almost every assistant coach and built his own coaching staff. He completely changed the offense for some crazy. So my biggest criticism the last 4 years is every 18 months, reboot plan. They have a plan now, I believe, so long as ownership supports Quinn and Landry and Kyle and the rest of the group in really letting that plan have time to develop and kind of get built out. It takes time to do these things. And so I feel like Quinn knows exactly what he wants. And I feel like Quinn has made that clear. Even Quinn's not always the most transparent person talking to the press. I mean, most NBA coaches are always a little bit cryptic, right? But how often did we hear him say last year, size? They have size, we don't have size. They have size, we don't have size. And so size, playing on the catch, playing fast, versatility, that's what he wants. And when you look at what they did draft-wise last year and the transactions that they made, I like I said, since the trade deadline of 2023, I think all their moves have been positive, like all of them. The DeJounte trade, as much as I respect him as a player, man, they let the market dictate like what it feels like there was no negotiation really from their side. Okay, this is the price, I'll pay it, and like I said, that's not me like not liking DeJounte. I think DeJounte offers his team a lot, especially if the team is built the right way. But I do think they have a plan. I think they have a vision, and I think the key thing is the organization needs to get behind Quinn and the things he says he needs on his roster to kind of build this thing up. And they just got to stick with it and not feel pressured to kind of, take a shortcut or skip steps or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's going to be a big part coming into his second full year as the head coach to see what he ends up, seeing the vision more laid out, a second year in it, more established guys getting their second year in it. Seeing who makes it from last year's team and guys that from last year's team that maybe could get bigger roles. Like you said, like love to see Kobe get a bigger role, Muhammad Gabe get a bigger role. How is Okongwu impacted, things of that nature. So it's going to be very interesting to see how everything kind of turns out in that regard as they try to, like I said, build the best roster they can to be competitive next year. Because I think obviously they know, like, all right, yeah, we need to be more in the firm thick of things in the playoffs next year as we continue to build this team moving forward, especially, like I said, with Trey being more outspoken about, listen, I'm trying to win some games. And again, seeing Indiana make it to these conference finals, and Indiana's I always say they're an interesting team because it seems like they shouldn't be there, but at the same time, it's like, okay, but their style of play is tough. There's a reason why they've been one of the best offensive teams, and Siakam was a big addition for them. So it'll be interesting to see, how all that turns out for this team moving forward. And I'm excited as we get closer to the draft to see, obviously, we're going to have a lot of rumors that still come out between now and then, see if anything else is maybe broken to us for news. And then when the league year starts July 1st, then we'll get the ship rolling of what they're going to actually end up doing. So it'll be exciting. But I appreciate you, Glenn, for coming on to the pod, man. Let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, 18-29's podcast there. I'm also doing the series over on Locked On Hawks with Brad, kind of player capsules. Let's continue. Brad had to understandably kind of shift directions and put even more draft content out once the Hawks got the first pick. But Brad and I are still continuing that series. In fact, he'll now be recording again this weekend on one player, and then on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it. I still call it Twitter, probably kind of old. At Willis_Glenn. Appreciate conversation and interaction there. Fun place to do that. And I always say, like, I know, like every fan base, there's infighting and all that sort of stuff. But I think we have it pretty good. There's a good group of people. Our community is, one that I enjoy the most, even if some crazy conversations can spin up now and then, like is always the case in every fan base. So yeah, find me on Twitter and find the pod. And the last thing I always like to say is go support guys over at Peachtree Hoops. They do great work. They're covering the draft. They're covering the dream, this year. And so Wes and his team over there are doing an awesome job. So I always like to encourage people to go support the great work they're doing over there too.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yeah. Peachtree Hoops, man, definitely been around for a while, doing great work covering the team. So definitely show some love over there. Show some love to Glenn too. And y'all already know about me. Y'all can follow me on Twitter, Bryce_2K. You can subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed this, or leave a rating and review if you're listening to any audio podcast that you could be listening to this to. And I appreciate all you guys for tuning in. So this was your Believe in Hawks podcast. I'm Bryce. That's Glenn. We'll see you next time.